Hello, everyone, and thank you very much for joining me today for this discussion about adaptive partnerships. I wanted to start with an introduction. I'm Margaret Anderson. I'm a Senior Director on the Inclusive Market Systems team at ACDI VOCA, and I will introduce our panelists here, who are practitioners in the market systems field. Joel Kidega is a Program Management and Market Systems Development Practitioner. His broad skills cover livelihoods, recovery, and economic development, youth employment, agriculture, markets and institutional management, and research with over 10 years in design and implementation of programs in rural and peri-urban environments. Joel has managed partnerships with private sector actors across the oilseed, livestock, cassava, horticulture, and cereal value chains. His previous assignments cover leadership roles in Zimbabwe, Iraq, Liberia, and Uganda. He has a master's in institutional management and leadership from the Uganda Management Institute, and he is currently based in Juba, South Sudan, where he serves as the Mercy Corps Food Security and Livelihoods Technical Advisor in partnership with the Swiss and French development agencies. Also joining us today on the panel is Netsalem Gebri, an economist and market systems development specialist. His skills encompass program management, value chain development, and design and delivery strategies for private sector engagement. He has 19 years of experience working in the private sector and for international and humanitarian development organizations. His career spanned across Southern and Eastern Africa, including Mozambique and Ethiopia. He holds a Master's of Science in Finance with focus on economic policy from the University of London, and he's currently based in Kampala, Uganda, where he serves as program director at Goal Global for MasterCard Foundation-funded programs. My ACDI VOCA colleague, Ricardo Pineda, is an agribusiness specialist and senior director with more than 40 years of international experience in the private sector and international development projects. He's worked with partnership portfolios, impact investing with a focus in green finance, as well as investment promotion, risk assessment, agrifinance, food processing, and food security partnerships. Ricardo has managed partnerships with actors in the coffee, cocoa, essential oils, dairy, and honey value chains. His professional experience spans the geography of Europe and the Americas and includes assignments in Brazil, Jamaica, Haiti, El Salvador, and Nicaragua. He holds an MBA in agribusiness from the University of Sao Paulo, and he's based in Tegucigalpa, Honduras, where he serves as the Deputy Chief of Party on the USAID Sustainable Agribusiness Activity. By way of background, I wanted to introduce how we came to this topic of adaptive partnerships. Within ACDI VOCA, we've had the recurring challenge that maybe a lot of practitioners share in market systems development with some of the inflexibility of contract structures for partnerships with market actors. And there's challenges ranging from technical staff not knowing or understanding some of the instruments or tactics that are available to them in these partnerships, or operations staff who may not understand market systems approaches. And there can be risk aversion and fear of breaking donor rules or even misinterpretations of donor rules. So we held a series of clinics with two outcomes in mind, hoping for a change in our projects and developing a new set of operational guidance. So our deliverable is this operational guide to adaptive partnerships. And we thought it would be really valuable for everyone to have a discussion with the three practitioners who I've already introduced and get their perspective on how to have more successful adaptive partnerships in the work that we do around the world. So without further ado, I'm going to dive into our question and answer session. So the broader question is where we're talking about applying adaptive management partnership strategies. Netsalem, let me start with you. I know from your background, you've applied adaptive market systems approaches in a number of environments, including with communities that have refugees and persons with disabilities. And I'm wondering, can you tell us about adaptive management strategies that you applied in partnership identification in these contexts?
Thanks, Margaret. Thanks, everyone. Margaret, as you have mentioned in your intro, for any market systems development, programming is partnership, the core element of programming or program implementation. So if we are implementing market systems development, basically we implement through permanent players, market actors, to provide different services to our target communities. So finding and identifying the right partners is very crucial. So over years, we have tried different approaches to find the right partners to work with for that sustainable change. And what we have learned and what we have adapted through this process was in many of the organizations that I have worked with, including with Goal, was the first step is identifying or distinguishing partnership from procurement of services. So oftentimes in different organizations, we implement market systems development programs, especially when the organization is new to the approach. So usually the internal operation systems struggle to understand that partnership because oftentimes in humanitarian response and development activities, organizations are used to procurement processes, procuring services. But partnership is very unique and distinct from procurement for services, where we buy services to deliver things, whereas partnership is to develop the system with shared value and collective actions. So for that, one of the major adaptations that we make in our partnership engagement toolkit is first to separate the two, to identify partners from a procurement system. So having that private sector engagement toolkit has really helped in identifying the right partners in many ways, which gives more flexibility than a rigid procurement process. By flexibility, I mean the way selecting private sector partners may take years. For example, the major ones, especially in area where development actors operate a thin market, where there are only limited players providing different services that we want. So for that, through diagnostic market research during inception phase of program design or inception phase. So we conduct diagnostic market research. In that, we interact with multiple actors that could potentially be a partner. So that's one way to identify and pinpoint a potential partner. Another way to identify partners is maybe past relationships, organizational relationship, or referrals. And there is also a way to make an open call to identify partners where you receive applications or consult notes from different partners. But in any way, this gives an opportunity to identify the right partners through an engagement that would involve co-designing intervention together. It involves providing an offer, negotiation, and designing an intervention that leads to signing partnership agreement and implementation. So all this process involves an adaptive management in that process of making that partnership. So the key again, to your question, the key adapting and making partnerships are making it more flexible, the way to select partners, differentiating it, the way you engage partners from the other process in the organization, and having that capacity and toolkits will be very relevant. So that way we can find a right partners. But in that design process, the type of engagement or the duration of partnership also play part in identifying the right partners.
Thank you,
back to you, Mark.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate what you said about flexibility and the identification of partnerships. I think flexibility is a big takeaway for these kind of relationships and being adaptive. I'd like to talk about the context of partnership redirection, when different things occur that force us to change the direction of a partnership. So, Joel, I understand from your background, you've used adaptive management in a variety of conflict-affected countries that include Iraq and Liberia and South Sudan. It seems like in these environments, the ability to adjust or redirect partnerships based on external circumstances and changing environments would be particularly crucial. Could you talk about examples of some partnerships you've worked with that had to change based on external circumstances?
But thank you, Margaret. Thank you for that question. And indeed, yes, adaptive partnership is crucial, especially in contexts where we work. I would give you example in what happened in Iraq. So Mexico in Iraq was contributing towards the efforts to revive micro-enterprise in agriculture after the ISIS war, where most of agricultural infrastructures were destroyed, businesses were lost, capital were lost, and all that. Now, to revive that, we needed to work with market players, different actors in the market. So we engage in multiple numbers of partnership, including with input companies, financial institutions, microfinance institutions, and all that. However, those partnerships experience quite a number of challenges. I would give you two examples. The first example was about changing prices as a result of inflation at the time. Most of the products that we needed were being imported from outside of the country. So changes in pricing in those countries affected our budgets, where we had already agreed on certain budgets, products costs had gone up, and then it became quite difficult for the partners to deliver as agreed in terms of the quantity, in terms of budgets and all that. So that therefore then needed adaptation to be made, by the program team, by the support team, and then the partnership. I would give you another example, was the issue with access to program areas. So after the conflict, there were different areas in Iraq where we were implementing the program, especially in Nineveh, were being controlled by different groups, and access to those areas sometimes were limited. And that then affected delivery of the programs on time. Now, as a program, we had to adapt to address these two key challenges. So the first challenge on inflation, we were using a mechanism within Mexico called fixed amount sub-award that has some rigid tendency in terms of cost, in terms of time, in terms of the technical design, in terms of how you had agreed prior to deliver the program. But because of this situation, then we had to sit with our finance and compliance team, the partner, and agree on a modality. One, we had to modify and allow for flexibility for our team together with the partner to review market prices at the time of payment and allow to consider payments based on the current market pricing or the prices at the time of payment. That then allowed the partner to be able to recover their costs that were drawn as a result of changes in pricing. This was not ordinary. This was not easy. It had to take a lot of discussions and meeting with the team. To address the issues of delivery on time, we also had to modify our agreements and adapt how to draw agreements. Especially, we had to agree to give a reasonably longer time between the start and the end date of the agreement, such that in between, the flexibility of deadlines for specific deliverables can be moved while the agreement is still active. Because it would take a different course if the agreement had expired or the contract had expired and all that. So that we were able to move forward with our agreements. The partners were able to implement the programs, and we had to succeed in multiple ways. Over thanks to you. Those are two examples that I could give.
Joel, thank you so much for these examples from Iraq. I think the cases you presented about price shocks and delays based on accessibility are very relevant in the context that we're working in. As recently as 2022, with the Russian invasion of Ukraine, we've all seen global price shocks to commodities such as fertilizer, and our programs have to adapt to realities in the face of these kinds of changes. In terms of partnerships, I'm interested in touching on the topic of partnership conclusion, which I think also hinges on partnership management and origination, as Netsalem talked about with selecting partners. And Ricardo, I want to turn to you, if I can, with a question about what you see as key ingredients for success in sustainable partnerships. I know that you work with a lot of agriculture sector partners through Market Systems lens on the sustainable agribusiness activity in Honduras. Can you share with us your perspectives on best practices for an exit strategy with partners?
Yes, thank you, Margaret. Well, long-term sustainability and the success of any exit strategy is a result of a healthy portfolio of partners. My colleagues already talk about the importance of good partnership identification and being able to adjust over time to the changing market and context conditions, which is not always easy with the donor. But I want to emphasize some of the ingredients, some of the following aspects that we have used here in Honduras for adaptive management. So understanding and prioritizing the problems that you must change is number one. Like in the coffee sector, for example, we conclude that there are 5 main changes that we need to do. But if I have to prioritize one of them is labor. It's a lack of enough labor in the rural areas. So identifying a partner, a service provider that works selling machinery for mechanized harvesting and weeding and pruning is a key. We implemented some young-led crews in 4 different regions in the country, and the first round, only one of them was successful, and we have to adapt the successful model to the other 3 regions. So there are several problems in the coffee sector, but if we can solve the labor problem, I think we will have long-term sustainability, because that's a big issue. Also understanding the context, you have families receiving $400 a month in remittance, and the young generations, they don't want to go and work in the coffee farm because I mean, their perception, they are not compelled to make $7 to $12 per day or $15 per day, and they prefer to be baristas in the coffee shop. So understanding all those problems will help you to identify the right partner in adapt. Also, one very important aspect is the negotiation, the result, payment for result mechanism. Adapting the milestones to the life cycle of the project, at least no less than 2 years, and merging the institution interest that we have as a project with the private sector interest. So that's also another key for success. Having a good payment for result mechanism, it makes a big difference. Then another challenge we had is our team is mainly agronomists, but converting these agronomists, technicians into alliance manager with a focus on environmental, social, and governance approach is also something that will guarantee a successful exit strategy. On the other hand, the monitoring and evaluation and the gender and social inclusion, it must make sense to partners. And so it's important to invest in digitalization so the data can be analyzed. Keep it simple, and if the partners understand the value for this data, they will become your best ambassadors for gender and social inclusion. We also focus on selecting the sectors where Honduras is already competitive or have competitive advantages. That doesn't make any sense to choose sectors that you are not competitive. And to have enough traction to create enough jobs or create enough economic opportunities, we need the export market. So for us, having partners, exporters in our portfolio is key. And also defining where is your entry point into the value chain. So having a mix of growers, processors, agro-industry, service providers, and buyers. Another important ingredient for success is the due diligence process. You need to make sure that the staff, we give a very heavy weight for the staff, good reputation, open-minded, that they open to embrace innovative approaches. We also believe that investing in trade shows and commercial missions to neighboring countries is the fastest way to innovate. So if you have your partners benchmarking what is going on around the region, that will also reduce the risk for, or will increase the likelihood of a success exit strategy. Investing in models to integrate youth into agriculture. We have developed the AgroPark model, which is very important because we need to make agriculture attractive for youth. The family business, most of our partnerships, or a big proportion of our partnerships are family business, and normally after the third generation, 80% of those family businesses disappear. So having also an ingredient of continuous education for the young farmers is key. And making sure that the private sector, if we can embed 5 services that producers need with the private sector, that's also a guarantee for success. Those 5 ingredients are access to market, access to credit, the technical assistance, technology, innovation, and information. So sustainability is directly related to the force of the market. If your partners are not or have a product that is not market driven, you're against the current. So we try to avoid the necessary evils like local supermarkets. We have some partners that sell to local supermarkets, but we prefer institutional markets or the export markets because there is a stronger force in that channel. And we also prefer we balance our portfolio, adding some value-added operations versus the perishable products. Also, business and marketing plans are part of our exit strategy. So my recommendation would be as well that you need to facilitate greater connectivity among the market actors. We normally do an annual meeting between all our partners, so for extending their networking. And once you build a model, a successful model, you have to show it. So having a model is key to facilitate the scaling up. One of the main challenges we have is who can do what we do. I will stop there. Thank you, Michael.
Ricardo, thank you so much. You've covered a lot of topics in terms of the requirements for successful partnerships and given a lot of context to how challenging it is to make successful partnerships with factors ranging from macroeconomic considerations of labor markets and remittances, which are factors in a lot of the countries where we work, as well as topics like the mindset of partners and the key ingredients to success for integration with the markets and the exit strategy as part of the business plan. I understand from everyone here that private sector actors are a key element of the success of market systems lens approaches. And I'm wondering, when working with these private sector partners, I'd like to talk about lessons learned or aha moments that any of you have had. Joel, if I can turn to you, in the course of your market systems development program in Zimbabwe, was there a key learning moment when you realized that you had to engage in a different way from how you had been with the private sector there?
Yeah. Thank you, Margaret. Indeed, yes. Not only in Zimbabwe, but all over. while implementing market systems or general program management, you need to be intentional as a manager to look for moments where you can reflect. So let me start with a lot more general ones with regards to these questions. One is to reflect further on your internal systems, mechanisms that you use, and how you can adapt that to any given context. So for example, mechanisms that are established, whether cyberward or, and all that by organizations, might not be applicable in its entirety in all the contexts. So reflections in terms of understanding the context and all that is critical for you to determine how to adapt your systems or partnership and all that. In my case, for example, there are a number of decision gates that we used. One that I could mention is our pre-award assessments that gets to establish partners' capacity for programmatic responsibility, partner capacity to manage finances. That is a point that you can determine that you need to adapt your tools, your mechanisms, your processes and systems with a given partner. Two, it's reviewing partnership processes regularly. For example, if you've got a partnership arrangement with a company, private actor for 6 months, for 1 year, you need to slot in between the time period, opportunities to review the progress of the partnership, to review the performance of the partner, to review how you are achieving the intended goals, the objectives, and all that. And then during that, you are able to see whether you need to adapt the partnership or not. And for me, these were very, very useful at times that you get to discuss with the partners. You get to have multiple stakeholders, including the partners, in the room, and you're able to identify issues that affect the partnership. There were also moments, especially when we were assessing interventions. So intervention-specific assessment, for example, if you're addressing an access to finance intervention, perhaps using a guarantee arrangement or another mechanism, when you get to assess that interventions, reflect on the assumptions, reflect on the goal, reflect on the intended outcomes of that intervention. You then get to determine whether you are on course, whether not, whether you need to do something differently. And for me, those were some of the points that I would then turn around and say, okay, we need to adapt, we need to manage things differently, among others. So there are actually multiple points that you can do that. And as well, join monitoring of activities together with the partner, together with other stakeholders. You could actually establish such moments to adapt. I'm happy to give more example. Thank you.
Joel, thank you so much. Hopefully in the Q&A, we'll have an opportunity for some other examples. I suspect some of our audience members might want to know more about the specific experiences you've had learning about partners. I appreciated what you said about applicability of processes to different environments, and because businesses vary enormously from their size and complexity, their sophistication and experience. And also you talked about monitoring. I think this is such an important topic of checking the status of results. And as Ricardo was talking about, not all interventions are successful everywhere, and some of them need to stop, and some of them need to change if they're going to move forward and continue. Ricardo, back to the context in Honduras, I'd also like to hear from you about a key learning experience you had when working with private sector partners in Honduras. You talked about the enterprises working with their coffee sector, exporters, and different ranges. So I wonder if there was anything surprising that you could share with us you learned in the course of managing these partnerships.
Yeah, well, a lot of surprises, a lot of knowledge. We are learning constantly, but one learning experience is that we could use as an example is like in agriculture, if you lose one crop cycle, if you are not on time with your service for planting, for example, then you lose 1 year. So we were supporting this biological lab that is producing biofertilizer bacteria that reduce the use of chemical fertilizers. But we find out that they had a liquid formula that requires refrigeration and cold chain. Access to cold chain distribution limits the amount of farmers that could benefit from this technology. So we cost shared the purchase of a spray dryer to dry to lyophilize to dry the bacteria, and so you don't need any refrigeration. But the spray dryer, because of logistic problems after COVID, was not on time in country, and we were almost losing the timing for inoculating these bacteria into the seeds because the planting system was on top of us. So we run and try to develop a liquid formula that do not require refrigeration. And that was the challenge. We were lucky. We made all the research in the field. We tried, and finally we were on time, and we were able to inoculate 68,000 doses of this that benefit 68,000 farmers that are using beans and maize seeds. So logistics sometimes can be challenging, but now we have a new product that can also be used in a liquid formula.
Thank you, Ricardo. I like this example a lot about using research and innovation to respond to a market challenge of the absence of cold chain. We could definitely have an entire separate panel on the topic of cold chain. But yeah, as you mentioned, in the agriculture sector, there is this huge time sensitivity of, the crops don't wait. And if something isn't ready at the right time, then you can lose the whole season. So the urgency of needing to adapt products to serve in the necessary time frame is a very real thing. So this is an exciting example of success with a new product and making it available to a broader audience. Nassab, I'd like to turn to you now. In Kampala, I know Uganda has a dynamic and complex private sector. Could you share an aha moment you had while working with private sector partners in this country or in another country context where you've worked?
Yeah, I think there are many aha moments working with private sector actors when you see enterprise delivering and providing their service to the underserved community. But I'd like to take one aha moment or what we find at Goal as a game changer to deliver program at scale sustainably, as well as attracting new investment from the private sector partners. We have a partnership with the Mastercard Foundation. Over years, we have been implementing at least 3 market systems development programs in Goal Uganda. And in the first 2 of those programs, the way we engage our private sector partners has been short-term engagement, at least an annual 1-year term partnership agreement. And every time when partnership ends, so we have to renew, go to review process. And so that adaptive process by itself has both its own administrative time consuming, as well as it breaks and loses momentum for private sector partners. Even some private sector partners would come for grant seeking, for short-term gain or for short-term benefit from the program. And also when you have that short-term partnership, I think the focus only becomes, to reaching some numbers or short-term successes. So since we adapt to make partnership a multi-year partnership, as you know, usually market systems development programs span for at least 5 years on average. And when the moment we change in our current program to multi-year partnership, at least 3-4 years partnership, we have seen a dramatic change on the behaviors of the private sector partners. the way they plan, they engage, they invest has dramatically changed. So they see now that long-term outlook to build that relationship with the young people that we are targeting in this program. We're targeting about 300,000 young people to find employment over 5 years. So it's a huge project with large scale multi-district, a large geographic coverage. So when we start applying this long-term partnership, what it has created is to have that a point of short feedback loop, short learning processes. So every quarter we review and we adapt if things has to change based on realities on the ground. You know, when we design based on assumptions and ideal scenarios, but things would change in the ground quite frequently. So it gives us room just to adapt as the partnership duration or period is still intact. So there is no time to pause or there is no time to lose the momentum. So what has made these partners is to invest more. So when they see that opportunity to expand in new area that they wouldn't have been without the project, so they strengthen their long-term presence in the area through establishing their agent network or different outlets, or establishing processing facilities, aggregation points. It's an agricultural project. So that has given us a result at scale. You know, in just 3-4 years, they have reached over 300,000 target that we have. That is, you know, them being there for long term, knowing, you know, those of partners that ending the partnership still continue and expand without our support in the area. So that multi-year partnership has been really a great opportunity for us to scale the program. It also gave us as an organization to build that local enterprise or local organization capacity, because that's a long-term relationship. So we coach them, we build capacity through that process, both in their way of operation or business management or engagement with the people that we are targeting. So that adaptation to multi-year partnership has been one of our aha moments.
Nessa, thank you very much for this point. I think it's really important to remember that the time horizon of a partnership is so key to building in sustainability and wide-reaching success. What you described is simply not feasible under a 1-year agreement term. And it's very hard in a lot of contexts where the program life is short, or there's other time constraints, or there's time required to get partnerships off the ground, or approval processes that hold up the path to moving partnerships forward. But I think this point about a long-term view or medium-term, the difference of 2-3 year relationships and what can result from them versus 1 year, and who comes to the table for those kind of opportunities is a really important one. I think it's getting to be time to start concluding our discussion, and I would like to ask every one of our panelists for a recommendation to other project team members. I suspect there are a lot of members of our audience who are very interested in understanding ways that they could manage more successful market systems partnerships and have adaptive relationships. So, Ricardo, I'll give the word back to you if you had to make a key recommendation to our audience members.
Yes, thank you, Margaret. Well, I think market system is a very strong way of changing the markets, the systems, and getting results. And we need, we have a big challenge because young farmers are not very compelled for agriculture, so we need to make farming attractive for the future generations. And we need to persuade young individuals that they can become successful entrepreneurs. So we need to create those models, those examples where we can show that. So for me, that's my recommendation. Thinking about the future, we need to think about young farmers and how to make farming attractive for future generations.
Thank you, Ricardo. That's a great point about the future context of agriculture and something we urgently need to do. in the sector. Joelle, if I could turn to you for a concluding recommendation you have for our audience on adaptive partnerships.
Thank you, Margaret. What comes first in my mind is recommendations that avoid copy and paste of systems, tools that have worked elsewhere and carrying them and using them in another context. That might not work because partners, actors in different contexts have different capacities, have different motivation, have different, incentives. And then the underlying issues that could, unlock their capacities to drive the change are different. Two, I would say if you're using a market systems, maintain the principle of market systems, but be flexible to adapt tools, adapt mechanisms in different contexts. What I do personally to allow space for me to manage a program, deliver a program with the flexibility required, is to develop standard operating procedures for partnership management, develop a separate toolkit for a program or maybe for a country program that speaks to the context in that country. And that will allow you to do proper implementation. And lastly, engage all the stakeholders, programs team, support teams, from compliance, from operations. Let them appreciate the flexibility required in market systems development. Over.
Well, thank you so much for these points. Very well taken. I really like what you said about flexibility and avoiding copy-paste and about stakeholder engagement. I think, unfortunately, this is something that can be left out sometimes, and it's a big risk area. Nessalem, over to you if you have a concluding recommendation for our audience.
Sure. A couple of recommendations on top of what Ricardo and Joel has said. Especially at co-design stage in partnership making, until we get to know partners, it takes time. But I highly recommend, or I can't recommend enough, to follow a very lean approach. By lean approach, I mean, we can't perfect partnership in a boardroom during that co-design process. Usually, one of the learning that we had with years was, when you go that process, detailed process to perfect the co-design process, the intervention, the budget, everything, it takes several months and you lose a lot of project time. And that plan, when met with reality, actually had to change it anyway. So following that lean approach in a very short period of time, building on what we know and designing intervention really helps to learn and then adapt intervention that fits to reality or fits to the context. So the second one is have a courage to end partnership. Sometimes due to maybe pressure from the donors or need, like anticipating partners will change. We carry partners that underperform or that are not really aligned in value with us, or may not have that capacity to deliver the change that we aspire. So in that instant, I think we need to have a courage to end this partnership. And my last point, again, working with private sector actors requires its own skill, organizational as well as individual skill. So building the capacity of the team to engage private sector actors in a way at par, at least to be their management consultant, to advise and to make those offer change and learn together, required to have a dedicated team that understand business very well. I hope this kind of adaptation in the program helps us to move forward.
Thank you so much. I especially appreciate this point about having the courage to end unsuccessful partnerships. I'm sure we've all worked in environments where there was a partner who was not delivering or not living up to expectations, and it can be difficult. There can be pressure from donors, but it's important to recognize relationships that are not working out and end those activities. I'd like to thank all of the panelists for your comments so far. We have a few minutes remaining for Q&A, and everyone in the audience, please feel free to drop your questions into the chat. I'll be sharing them with our panelists. We have a couple of questions in here already. This first one, I'm going to direct this to Joel. How do you fit these ideas of flexibility and co-design while searching for partners with short-term humanitarian projects? Joel, if you would like to answer.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Yeah, this is a very important question. And many times, especially implementing MSD program in a humanitarian context with short-term programs is quite challenging. But there are a couple of success stories or maybe examples of good practices that you could do. Short-term programs, you tend to identify partners way early, perhaps even due the proposal development and all that, because it's 1 year, it's 8 months, and you know, while you develop the proposal, you're already mapping out who your partners whom you can implement with, and then be able to actually drive the design together. That will shorten the time of looking for partner, you know, and all those other processes within the actual implementation period of the program. Two, one thing that I want to mention is that co-design, actually, if properly planned, done well, shorten the partnership process. It's different from where there is, you know, exchanges of emails. You need a partner to come out with the idea on their own, send it to you, you review, you revert back. It's time taking, it's, you know, and you know, the partners then loses morale, momentum to move forward. Where you come in the room together, you know, clarify on the ideas, support each other, build ideas together, shorten the time. And I think it's a good practice. And like Netsalem mentioned, you can't complete everything. So if you've got room for reviews and all that, craft that partnership, and then you can build that idea even while you implement. So for me, yes, these are some of the things that you can do.
Joel, thank you so much for this very targeted advice on successful partnerships in these short-term humanitarian assistance contexts. I'd like to draw everyone's attention. I've asked our tech moderator to post a link in the chat that is leading a guide to ACDI VOCA's operational handbook on adaptive partnerships. So if you're interested in hearing or reading more about this topic, we have a resource available. That's the deliverable of these market systems clinics that my colleagues have hosted. We have one more question in the chat here. I think since it references USAID, Ricardo, I'll direct this to you. What are your thoughts on exclusivity with local partners? Often, USAID will prohibit local organizations from being exclusive, which might limit them from being true partners in implementation and minimize their roles to data collection or being resource firms.
Well, if I understand the question correctly, exclusivity, I think you need to perform, and it has to, and depends on the risk sharing between the donor of the project and the implementing partner. So asking for exclusivity or seeing exclusivity as a bottleneck to perform, I don't think is good, because if you are a local partner that you perform well, the exclusivity will come later on. All the donors will look for you, and so I don't think I won't spend time trying to have an exclusive agreement with one project. I don't think it's a win-win situation.
Thank you so much, Ricardo. Are there any other questions in the chat? Or I think with 1 minute left, it's almost time to conclude. Geneva? No more questions. All right. I'd like to once again thank all of our panelists today, especially our panelists from East Africa calling in from late Friday evening time zones. I really enjoyed this discussion, and I hope the audience found some interesting lessons and takeaways from this. Thanks so much for joining us today, everyone. Have a good rest of your day.